You know that moment when your perfectly curated life, the one you've meticulously built brick by expensive brick, decides to spontaneously combust right in front of your eyes? Yeah, that was my Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. I, Charlene Miller, a 38-year-old corporate lawyer whose daily existence revolved around billable hours and strategic dismantling of opposing counsel, was supposed to be on my way home to Boston. Instead, my luxury sedan, a gleaming testament to my relentless ambition, decided to stage a dramatic breakdown in Fairview, New Hampshire, a town so quaint it probably still used dial-up internet and thought artisanal meant a particularly well-crafted scarecrow. And just when I was about to call my husband, Ben, Mr. Predictable, Mr. Perfect, Mr. I color code our spice rack, I saw him, my Ben, laughing, holding hands, with a fiery redhead named Crystal, whose aura practically screamed, "I smell like patchouli and questionable life choices." Apparently, finding your husband's second family on Facebook isn't what they mean by expanding your social network. This was a live-action, unscripted betrayal, and I was the unsuspecting audience member who suddenly realized she was the star of the show. The initial shock hit me like a rogue wave. My brain, usually a high-speed processor for complex legal arguments, momentarily glitched. Ben? My Ben? The man who considered a spontaneous trip to the grocery store a wild adventure? The man who ironed his socks and meticulously organized his tie collection by shade and fabric? He was radiating genuine, unadulterated joy with another woman, a woman who looked like she'd just stepped out of a free-spirited commune. My first instinct wasn't to cry, or scream, or even throw my high-heeled pump at the window of the Daily Grind, the suspiciously vibrant coffee shop they were exiting. No, my first instinct, honed by years of corporate litigation, was pure, unadulterated analysis. Evidence. My second thought was, is this a hidden camera show? Am I being punked by Ashton Kutcher circa 2003? Because this level of suburban absurdity felt less like reality and more like a poorly written sitcom. My life, up until that precise moment, had been a meticulously planned spreadsheet of success. 12 years married to Ben, 39, a financial advisor whose LinkedIn profile practically screamed trustworthy, and pillar of the community. We lived in a charming upper-middle-class house in Newton, a Boston suburb, the kind with a perfectly manicured lawn, a 2-car garage, and a Home Depot just a short drive away. We were the couple who hosted tasteful dinner parties, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and had a joint savings account that would make most people weep with envy. We were the American dream, packaged neatly with a bow. Or so I thought. My current predicament? Stranded in Fairview, New Hampshire, a town that seemed to exist solely to prove that time travel was possible, because it felt like 1985 had thrown up on Main Street. My luxury sedan, a symbol of my hard-earned career, had sputtered its last breath right outside the Daily Grind. The irony wasn't lost on me. My daily grind had just taken a very unexpected detour into the twilight zone of marital infidelity. I remember the exact second. My phone was in my hand, poised to dial Ben, my supposed knight in shining, financially stable armor. I was already formulating my frustrated but still professional tone, ready to explain the inconvenience of a dead battery. Then, through the slightly grimy window of my dead car, I saw them. Ben, my Ben, laughing. And not just any laugh. That deep, uninhibited belly laugh he usually reserved for Super Bowl Sundays when the Patriots scored a touchdown, or my most embarrassing childhood stories involving a questionable perm and a school play. And then, the hand-holding. A casual, intimate clasp, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. With a woman. A woman I'd never seen before, with fiery red hair that looked like it had been styled by a team of woodland creatures, and a smile so wide it threatened to swallow her face. Crystal. The name popped into my head from a fleeting glimpse of her name tag, as she turned to whisper something in his ear. Crystal. Sounded like a cheap souvenir from a roadside attraction, or perhaps a particularly sparkly stripper name. My blood, usually a steady flow of caffeine and ambition, began to boil. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was an insult to my intelligence. Did he think I wouldn't notice? Did he think I wouldn't eventually stumble upon his little side project, his spiritual awakening in a town that probably didn't even have a functioning traffic light on weekends? The silence in my dead car was deafening, amplifying the sound of my own thoughts clicking into place. This wasn't just about a broken car, it was about a broken trust, a shattered illusion. And I, Charlene Miller, wasn't about to be the weeping wife in a made-for-TV movie. Oh no. I was about to become the lead counsel in my own personal legal drama, and Ben and his little redhead were about to face the most formidable opponent they'd ever encountered. They had no idea who they were messing with. The game, as they say, was officially on, and I was playing to win. The question wasn't if they'd pay, but how spectacularly, and with what level of public humiliation. This wasn't just a divorce, it was a hostile takeover of my own narrative. My first order of business, after the initial shock wore off and the cold, hard fury set in, was to get my car towed. Not to Ben's usual mechanic, obviously. That would be too normal, too traceable, too much like I was still part of his perfectly orchestrated life. I found a local garage, Fairview Auto and Tire, which looked like it hadn't seen an upgrade since before the internet was invented. The mechanic, a grizzled man named Earl, whose overalls seemed to be held together by sheer force of will and decades of grease, promised to look at it sometime before the next ice age, darlin'. Perfect. This gave me time. Time to stew, time to plan, and most importantly, time to observe. I checked into the only motel in town, the Sleepy Hollow Inn, which lived up to its name by looking like a set piece from a low-budget horror movie, complete with flickering neon sign and a faint smell of mildew. But at least it had Wi-Fi. Because even in the midst of existential marital crisis, a girl needs her intel. My internal monologue during those first few hours was a masterclass in dark humor and self-preservation. My perfect life just became a Lifetime movie, and I was clearly the unsuspecting protagonist about to get her revenge montage. Ben, the man who scrutinized every line item on our monthly budget, was apparently investing in a whole new life, complete with a spiritual guru and a town that probably didn't even have a target. He suddenly looked less like a dedicated financial advisor and more like a character from a bad sitcom, desperately trying to escape his own mundane reality. All those late nights at the office, the weekend golf tournaments that always seemed to take him out of town, especially to places vaguely upstate or rural, they weren't just excuses, they were meticulously crafted alibis. And here I was, thinking he was just a workaholic like me, only with better golf swings and a deeper appreciation for spreadsheets. Turns out, his work trips were actually job interviews for a new family, a new identity, and a whole new level of betrayal. I immediately went full FBI profiler on Crystal. A quick Google search, a few clicks on social media, and boom. Crystal Evergreen, holistic wellness coach and spiritual guide. My eyes nearly rolled out of my head so hard they could have landed in the stale coffee cup beside me. Ben, the man who scoffed at kale, thought mindfulness was a type of expensive cheese, and considered a brisk walk around the block his peak physical activity, was shacked up with a woman who probably burned sage, talked to crystals, and preached about manifesting abundance. The irony was so thick, you could spread it on toast and serve it at a potluck. Her Instagram was a kaleidoscope of yoga poses on mountaintops, probably photoshopped, inspirational quotes about manifesting your best life, and pictures of organic smoothies that looked suspiciously like pond scum. It was giving major dumpster fire vibes, but in a very serene, earthy tone, complete with a filter that made everything look like it was bathed in perpetual golden hour. The more I scrolled, the more the microaggressions of my marriage came flooding back, now recontextualized as glaring neon red flags. Ben's subtle dismissals of my career. "Are you sure you want to take on another big case, honey? You work so hard. Maybe you should take a break. Focus on us." His support that always felt more like control. "I've got the finances covered. You just focus on your big lawyer brain. No need to worry about the numbers, darling." He always made me feel like the strong, independent woman was a role I played for the world. But at home, I was just supposed to be his perfectly competent sidekick, a well-dressed accessory. He'd gaslight me into thinking my exhaustion was my own fault, not a symptom of carrying the weight of a high-stress job and a marriage where I was clearly doing all the emotional heavy lifting. "Are you sure you're not just stressed, Charlene? You seem a little on edge. Maybe you need some me time?" Oh, I was on edge, all right? The edge of a cliff, about to push him off with a smile and a perfectly worded legal brief. The indignation built like a slow-motion train wreck. I remembered Thanksgiving last year, when Ben's mother, bless her passive-aggressive heart, had asked if I was ever going to slow down and focus on what really matters like a family. Ben had just smiled, a picture of supportive husband, while I wanted to throw the cranberry sauce at her. Now, I realized that smile wasn't support, it was complicity. They all wanted me to be less, to shrink, so Ben could be more, available for his secret life, his spiritual awakening with a woman who probably believed in moon cycles more than tax cycles. I spent the next 2 days in Fairview, living off lukewarm coffee and stale motel pastries, but my brain was on fire. I watched Ben and Crystal from a distance, like a suburban spy. They had brunch at the Daily Grind, went for nature walks, Crystal in flowing linen, Ben in his usual golf polo, looking deeply uncomfortable as he tried to keep up with her energetic pace, and even attended a community drum circle. I almost choked on my coffee at that one, picturing Ben, Mr. Corporate, banging on a bongo. This wasn't a fling. This was a full-blown, granola-munching, spiritual awakening affair. Ben was living a whole other life, a life I was clearly not invited to, nor would I ever want to be. The rage was now a cold, precise instrument. I wasn't just angry. I was offended. Offended by the audacity, the sloppiness, the sheer disrespect. They were about to learn that a lawyer scorned is not just a woman with a broken heart. She's a woman with a very expensive law degree, a penchant for poetic justice, and an ironclad resolve. And I was just getting started. The real show, the one where I got to write the script, was about to begin. My unexpected forced sabbatical in Fairview wasn't just for emotional processing and sarcastic commentary. It was for reconnaissance, a deep dive into the murky waters of my husband's double life. Being a corporate lawyer means you learn to dig. You learn to connect dots that no one else sees, to sift through mountains of data for that one crucial piece of information that can turn a case on its head. And the deeper I dug into Ben's little Fairview fantasy, the more rotten things became. It wasn't just a simple affair. It was a meticulously constructed financial scheme, with Crystal Evergreen as a key, albeit potentially unwitting player. Or so I thought at first. The crucial discovery came from a local real estate listing. Ben had been investing in a series of boutique wellness retreats in Fairview, properties that Crystal was supposedly managing and promoting as part of her holistic empire. On paper, it looked like a legitimate, if slightly flaky and overly optimistic side venture. But my legal eagle eyes, accustomed to spotting red flags from a mile away, spotted the discrepancies immediately. The properties were being purchased through a series of shell corporations, registered in a state known for its lax financial oversight. Delaware, of course, the go-to for anyone wanting to hide something. And the funds? They were being funneled through a labyrinthine series of offshore accounts, making them incredibly difficult to trace. Accounts that, upon closer inspection, were linked to some of Ben's high-net-worth clients he had been advising to invest in these very retreats, promising them incredible returns and tax benefits. My jaw didn't just drop. It hit the sticky motel carpet with a thud, sending a small cloud of dust bunnies scattering. This wasn't just infidelity. This was financial fraud. My husband wasn't just cheating on me. He was potentially defrauding his clients, laundering money, and building a secret empire based on lies and spiritual mumbo-jumbo. Turns out, "Till death do us part" doesn't cover finding your husband's replacement and his federal indictment. My law degree wasn't just for corporate mergers and complex contract negotiations. Turns out it was also excellent for dismantling fraudulent marital contracts and exposing white-collar crime. The initial shock of the betrayal transformed into a laser-focused determination. The emotional pain was still there, a dull ache in the background, a constant reminder of the shattered trust, but it was overshadowed by the exhilarating thrill of the chase. This was a case, a complex, high-stakes case, and I was going to win it. Not just for myself, for my own vindication, but for every unsuspecting client Ben had duped into his little wellness scheme. This was bigger than just us. It was about justice. I immediately called Olivia, my best friend and a brilliant litigator at my firm, known for her sharp wit and even sharper legal mind. I gave her the CliffsNotes version, punctuated by my usual sarcastic flair, pacing my tiny motel room. So, remember how Ben was always working late on those big deals that were too sensitive to discuss? Turns out, the deal was a red-headed spiritualist, a town that time forgot, and a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme disguised as holistic healing centers. Olivia, bless her heart, didn't even flinch. She just let out a low whistle. "Charlene, you always find the most interesting cases. Send me everything. Every single detail. We'll make this a case study in betrayal." She was my ride or die, my legal wingwoman, and the only person who truly understood the particular brand of chaos that was my life, and how to weaponize it. Over the next few weeks back in Boston, I meticulously prepared. I didn't confront Ben. Not yet. That would be too easy, too satisfying in the short term, and utterly detrimental to my long-term strategy. I played the part of the busy, slightly distant wife, consumed by my work, barely noticing his business trips to Fairview. Ben, oblivious, seemed almost relieved. He probably thought I was just being my usual workaholic self, too focused on billable hours and corporate takeovers to notice his little spiritual escapades. He had no idea I was building a case against him that would make his carefully constructed life implode faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. I gathered financial records, traced transactions, compiled evidence of his client solicitations for these retreats, and even found Crystal's real, far less spiritual background, a former real estate agent with a history of questionable dealings and a penchant for disappearing acts. She wasn't just a naive spiritualist, she was a willing participant, perhaps even the architect of the fraud. The humor in all this was dark, delicious. Imagining Ben, the man who meticulously balanced our checkbook to the penny, getting tangled in such a messy, unsophisticated scam. It was like watching a perfectly tailored suit unravel into a pile of cheap polyester threads. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I felt like a spider weaving a magnificent, intricate web, and Ben and Crystal were blissfully unaware flies, buzzing closer and closer, lured by the promise of easy money and spiritual enlightenment. Every time Ben would casually mention a business trip to Fairview or a retreat he was overseeing, I'd smile sweetly, offering to pack him extra organic protein bars or a new meditation pillow. The irony was a gourmet meal, a feast for my vengeful soul. I was preparing not just for a divorce, but for a public dismantling, a professional and personal reckoning that would leave no stone unturned, no lie unexposed. And when it came, it would be swift, precise, and utterly devastating. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the curtain was about to rise on the most satisfying performance of my life. Ben had underestimated me, and that was his first and last fatal mistake. The day of reckoning arrived, not with a bang, but with a meticulously planned legal filing, a symphony of paperwork designed to dismantle a life. I chose a Monday morning, the start of the work week, when Ben would be at his most confident, most in control, basking in the glow of his supposed success. He had a big client presentation scheduled, a major pitch for a new, supposedly lucrative investment fund. Probably another one of his spiritual wellness scams, just rebranded. He was dressed in his usual power suit, radiating an air of untouchable success, his hair perfectly coiffed, his briefcase gleaming. He even gave me a peck on the cheek before leaving, completely oblivious, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Wish me luck, honey," he'd said, his voice brimming with self-importance. "Break a leg," I'd replied, a mischievous glint in my eye he thankfully missed, too wrapped up in his own self-congratulatory bubble. My plan wasn't just about divorce, it was about exposing the financial fraud. I didn't want his money, I wanted his reputation, his carefully constructed facade, to crumble in front of everyone who believed in him, everyone he had ever conned. With Olivia by my side, a formidable force in her own right, we filed the divorce papers, a standard, albeit emotionally charged legal document. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was a separate, much more damaging civil lawsuit against Ben and Crystal, detailing the fraudulent investment scheme, complete with damning evidence of wire fraud, misrepresentation, and a clear pattern of deceit. Simultaneously, we anonymously tipped off the financial regulatory authorities, the SEC, the IRS, providing them with a mountain of irrefutable evidence, bank statements, email exchanges, recorded phone calls, and Crystal's less-than-stellar background check. The execution was flawless, like a perfectly choreographed ballet of destruction, each step timed to perfection. The first domino fell at precisely 10 a.m. While Ben was mid-sentence in his presentation, probably extolling the virtues of diversified portfolios and conscious capitalism, his phone buzzed with an emergency alert from his bank. His personal and business accounts, along with those of his shell corporations, were frozen. Simultaneously, a process server, a burly man with a poker face, walked directly into his office, not with a bouquet, but with a stack of legal documents, the divorce papers and the civil lawsuit. The look on his face, as described by a very amused colleague who later spilled the tea over a celebratory martini, was priceless. He went from master of the universe to deer in headlights faster than you can say embezzlement. His jaw just dropped, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost or a federal indictment. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. The news of the frozen accounts and the lawsuit spread like wildfire through his firm, a toxic cloud of scandal. Clients began pulling their investments en masse, realizing they had been duped. The financial regulatory authorities launched a full-scale investigation, their agents swarming his office, seizing computers and documents. Crystal, meanwhile, was served at one of her wellness retreats in Fairview, mid-meditation session, surrounded by her gullible followers. I heard she screamed so loud, she probably disrupted the local wildlife and shattered every crystal in her healing sanctuary. Her Instagram, once a beacon of manufactured serenity and filtered sunshine, was suddenly inundated with angry comments from investors demanding their money back, accusing her of being a charlatan and a thief. Her spiritual guide persona evaporated faster than morning dew on a hot pavement. Ben's reactions were a masterclass in pathetic denial, described to me with relish by Olivia, who was enjoying the fallout almost as much as I was. He called me, screaming, sputtering, accusing me of being a cold, heartless witch, a vindictive monster, and a gold digger. I just listened, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips, my phone on speaker as I sipped my coffee. "Ben," I said, my voice calm and collected, a lawyer's voice devoid of emotion. "I'm a lawyer. I deal in facts. And the facts, darling, are not on your side. You built this house of cards, not me." He tried to blame Crystal, then me, then the system, then even the alignment of the planets. It was a comedic performance, really, a desperate flailing. He, the man who always had an answer, always a perfectly rehearsed line, suddenly had nothing but desperate excuses and the sound of his own unraveling. He was a train wreck, and I was the conductor who pulled the emergency brake, then stood back to admire the wreckage. The poetic justice was almost too good to be true. Ben, who prided himself on his financial acumen, his shrewd investments, was facing ruin, his reputation in tatters. Crystal, who built her brand on authenticity and transparency, was exposed as a fraudster, her spiritual empire crumbling. Their little love nest in Fairview, the wellness retreat properties, were seized as assets, destined to be sold off to repay the defrauded clients. The irony was delicious. Their illicit romance, built on lies and stolen money, literally became their downfall. They had wanted to escape the corporate grind and live a free-spirited life. Well, now they had plenty of free time. probably in a very small, government-issued room, contemplating their life choices. There was one final, unexpected twist. During the extensive financial investigation, it was discovered that Ben hadn't just been defrauding his clients. He'd also been systematically siphoning off funds from our joint accounts for years, using them to prop up Crystal's failing businesses and fund his elaborate double life. It wasn't just a secret affair. It was a calculated, long-term financial drain, a betrayal that cut even deeper. This revelation, while painful, solidified my resolve. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine, both financially and emotionally. The powerful had fallen from their self-made pedestals, and it was glorious to watch. My life, once a meticulously planned spreadsheet, was now a thrilling, unpredictable adventure, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Life after the Ben-pocalypse was, surprisingly, less of a dumpster fire and more of a phoenix rising from the ashes, albeit a phoenix with a very sarcastic sense of humor and a newfound appreciation for solo travel. The divorce was finalized in record time, thanks to the overwhelming, irrefutable evidence against Ben. He got what he deserved: a heavily scrutinized financial future, a tarnished reputation that would follow him like a bad smell, and a life that was decidedly less perfect than he'd always pretended it was. Crystal, true to her transient, ethereal nature, vanished, presumably off to find a new town and a new set of unsuspecting investors for her next spiritual scam. Good riddance. The world was a safer place without her wellness schemes. I, Charlene Miller, was officially free. And let me tell you, freedom tastes a lot like a perfectly chilled glass of Napa Valley Chardonnay, a gourmet takeout meal from my favorite Thai place, and the sweet satisfaction of knowing you didn't just survive, you thrived. The whole ordeal taught me a few things. First, never trust a man who irons his socks with obsessive precision. It's a sign they're overcompensating for something far more sinister than wrinkles. Second, karma isn't just a concept. It's a legal process that can be expedited with a good lawyer and a mountain of evidence. And third, the best kind of perfect isn't a husband who lies, but a life you build yourself, brick by sarcastic brick, on a foundation of truth and self-respect. My suburban house in Newton, once a symbol of our shared fake perfection, became my sanctuary. I immediately redecorated, purging every trace of Ben's beige, predictable, safe taste. It was now a vibrant, unapologetically me space, filled with bold colors, modern art, and a fully stocked bar. I still worked hard, probably harder than ever, but now it was for me, for my firm, for my clients, not for some shared illusion. My career flourished. My colleagues, who had initially offered condolences, now looked at me with a mix of awe, slight fear, and a newfound respect. "Charlene," Olivia said one day over a celebratory brunch at a trendy Boston spot, "you're like a cautionary tale and an inspiration all rolled into one. A hot mess in the best possible way. Who knows how to slay a courtroom and a cheating husband?" I took it as the highest compliment. Ben? Last I heard, he was living in a small, nondescript apartment in a less than desirable part of the city, working a low-level, entry-level job, probably still trying to convince someone, somewhere, that he was a victim of circumstances. His social media, once a carefully curated highlight reel of success and happiness, was now a ghost town, barren and silent. No more golf course selfies, no more carefully staged power lunches, no more humble bragging about his investments. Just the quiet hum of a life that had been stripped bare, a stark contrast to the opulent facade he once maintained. It was a stark reminder that while money can buy a lot of things, houses, cars, even a spiritual guide, it can't buy integrity, genuine happiness, or a good night's sleep when the feds are knocking. And it certainly can't buy back a reputation once it's been shredded by a determined lawyer. As for my own reflection, I didn't become a bitter, jaded woman. I became a wiser, sharper, and infinitely funnier one. The experience had been a crucible, burning away the illusions and leaving behind a stronger, more authentic version of myself. I learned that sometimes The biggest betrayals lead to the greatest liberations. I learned to trust my instincts, even when they were screaming, "This man is a walking red flag waving a giant banner that says, 'Run.'" And I learned that the best revenge isn't living well. It's living better, with a killer sense of humor, a perfectly executed legal strategy, and the knowledge that you are the master of your own narrative. So, if you ever find your car broken down in the middle of nowhere, and you happen to spot your perfect partner holding hands with a spiritual guide who smells faintly of sage and desperation, don't despair. Don't cry. Don't even get mad. Just remember Charlene Miller. Because sometimes, the biggest plot twists are just the universe's way of telling you it's time to write your own, much more satisfying ending. And trust me, mine was a bestseller. Period.